Morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is October 23rd, 2023. And Jody Wilson Raybould, Larry Brock, DPA, the Deferred Prosecution Agreement, SNC Lavalin, and it's all back in the news, baby. It's like it's 2020 again, 2019 again. Fundamentally, what's happened is the RCMP released a report that said, we couldn't investigate Justin Trudeau because we asked him about it and he refused to release the information. So that was the end of our investigation. And people are not happy about that. So Larry Brock is leading the charge, and that's where we'll start today. More to the barn than $8 million. And I have pictures of the barn. So we had a kitchen table talk yesterday, and it was very fun. It was nice to see everybody. Everybody showed up, and some people had some very interesting insights with regards to what exactly is the barn that was $8 million, because we were discussing how could a barn be $8 million. And my friend said, well, it wasn't even actually a barn. It was something else. So I've got a link to show you from an opinion piece, and we've got a picture of the barn. It's quite a lot more than just a barn. So $8 million for this. Does Harrington Lake go with Trudeau, or does the government get to keep that after Trudeau's gone? Does Trudeau intend to just stay there for a very long time? Who knows? But hopefully Harrington Lake stays with the government and Trudeau is gone soon in the short term. The bubble in the housing market is subsidized by the government, and I've got lots of really good color. There's a 10-minute video that you should watch. Link is in the description. On the bubble, and we're going to look at about a minute-long portion of that video talking about how the Toronto bubbles burst. But he's got some really interesting insights, and I thought it was a good video, so I'll share that. People's Party of Switzerland wins big in their federal elections, so there you go. 2 weird True North tweets to show you. Yeah, and they've got Danielle Smith. They had a live event, and they've got Danielle Smith there, and that's an interesting one. And then there's 2 weird ones, so I'll show you the weird ones. The Alberta Pension Plan, Danielle Smith's talking about that. That's the one that she's talking to Andrew Lawton about. And speaker update. The other day I told you that it was a new rule where Speaker Fergus had said that if Trudeau's not in the House, that you can't say his name. And fundamentally, that rule has been in play before. This is not a new rule. Some speakers enforce it, some speakers don't enforce it. And it was because it tickled. I was thinking about it, and I thought, I'm sure I heard Rhoda say you can't talk about Trudeau if he's not here, when he was the speaker. So this is a rule that's been long-standing. It's not new. Some speakers enforce it more than others. And Fergus was brought in as speaker. He said that I'm going to restore order and decorum to the House. And a lot of times that means that I'm going to, abide by the rules. And then he was like, yeah, it's 2:15, whatever. So I don't know. Figure it out, right? We are always behind because of the confusing rhetoric that they're using. Rhetoric like completely contradictory lies and things like that. The stuff that the Liberals do quite often. Anyway, regardless, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First up, we're going to talk about the RCMP and their investigation into SNC Lavalin that ended when Trudeau said, yeah, no, I'm not going to release anything. So that's weird. Here's Michael Barrett. He's an MP, and he says, news now, the RCMP documents released this week reveal the police were unable to pursue criminal charges against Justin Trudeau because Trudeau did not provide all information requested. Commissioner of the RCMP will testify before Ethics Committee tomorrow. That's today. So that's interesting. It's kind of like, sir, we'd like you to breathe into this. And you say no. And then they say, okay, well, that's this traffic stop done. Case closed. This guy said no. This guy said no. He says no. Carry on. See you later. Have a good night. Right? Is that how things work? No. Oh, here's Larry Brock. He's talking about this revelation. He's not very happy. It's a minute long. Here we go.
Good morning. Here at the Toronto airport early Sunday morning, ready to board a flight back to Ottawa to get ready for an Ethics Committee hearing happening tomorrow afternoon. The RCMP Commissioner will be testifying regarding their ongoing investigation with the Prime Minister's interference in the SNC prosecution. We all remember that prosecution. That was where the Prime Minister fired the first Canadian Indigenous female Attorney General. What is he hiding? He's been hiding the truth from the RCMP for several months, if not several years. He refuses to cooperate. What do you think would happen to us if we refused to cooperate with the RCMP? I think we know the answer to that. No one, I repeat, no Canadian is above the law. And that includes you, Justin. See you tomorrow.
Ooh, right? Are we wrestling or what, right? Macho Man's coming in. Here is Jody Wilson Raybould, and Larry Brock says, Jody Wilson Raybould clearly articulates that she was subject to an orchestrated campaign by Justin Trudeau to grant special exemptions to SNC Lavalin. I remember this. It's so visceral. It seems like such a big scandal, and here we are years later. Here's Jody Wilson-Raybould.
For a period of approximately 4 months between September and December of 2018, I experienced a consistent and sustained effort by many people within the government to seek to politically interfere in the exercise of prosecutorial discretion in my role as the Attorney General of Canada in an inappropriate effort to secure a deferred prosecution agreement with SNC-Lavalin. These events involved 11 people, excluding myself and my political staff, from the Prime Minister's office, the Privy Council office, and the office of the Minister of Finance. This included in-person conversations, telephone calls, emails, and text messages. There were approximately 10 phone calls and 10 meetings specifically about SNC, and I and/or my staff were a part of these meetings. Within these conversations, there were expressed statements regarding the necessity of interference in the SNC-Lavalin matter, the potential of consequences, and veiled threats if a DPA was not made available to SNC. These conversations culminated in December the 19th of 2018 with a conversation I had with the clerk of the Privy Council, a conversation that I will provide some significant detail on. A few weeks later, on January the 7th, 2019, I was informed by the Prime Minister that I was being shuffled out of the role of Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
It's still the subject of media reporting all these years later. 5 years later, people are still trying to get answers about what happened because Canadians have a desire to get the truth. In the Toronto Star, there is a story that says documents reveal why RCMP didn't pursue criminal probe of Justin Trudeau and SNC-Lavalin affair. It says the Royal Canadian Mounted Police declined to pursue a criminal investigation into Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's actions during SNC-Lavalin affair, in part because the federal police force was thwarted in a bid to get confidential cabinet materials, newly released documents show. Now, the question that this raises, of course, is if Prime Minister Trudeau used his power to break Section 139 of the Criminal Code. And that says, everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice in a judicial proceeding is guilty of an offence. So the Conflict of Interest Act was broken. The question is, was the Criminal Code broken? And this scandal, this saga that saw Canada's first Indigenous Attorney General fired, and of course, the then health minister had to follow her out the door.
So, very, very interesting. This whole SNC thing is coming back to bite Trudeau in the butt a little bit, right? Just a little bit. And what's the RCMP doing? What are they busy with? What could possibly be more important than investigating these important things or getting to the bottom of these important Canadian scandals that have been affecting our nation for years? Well, the Toronto Star reports the RCMP sees an improvement in employees completing mandatory anti-racism training. Anti-racism is anti-white nonsense crap. So instead of actually doing their jobs and investigating the criminality in our government, the RCMP is attending anti-white, anti-racism nonsense training. What a ridiculous, ridiculous thing to undermine our country, right? And I think our police force has been, well, all of our institutions, our legal institution, the whole Supreme Court, all of our court systems have been corrupted, I think. And our police forces have been corrupted to the point of they're more interested in finding somebody who's misgendered somebody or been mean online than they are at stopping actual criminals from committing actual crimes. It's really quite something to witness. And it's not good. It's just something that's happening that I didn't expect to happen. Here's Joe Warmington talking about the speaker stuff from yesterday, and I wanted to correct it because when I get things wrong, I like to correct it and mention things, especially if I've misunderstood a story or misreported a story, because that happens, right? I've got a lot going on. Sometimes I read an article and I'll be interrupted halfway through reading the article, and then when it comes time to report it, I've got like most of it in my head, but then I realize that I haven't read the whole thing because I was interrupted or something like that, and it's like, oh no, I'm in the middle of doing the show. Sometimes I'll stop and read the rest of the article to make sure it's fulsome, but sometimes I don't, and this was one of those situations. Regardless, the speaker rule is not new, and it's enforced differently speaker to speaker. So Joe Warmington is reporting this as new. He says Liberals trying their best to take away the one place left where the opposition can hold government to account. The best being the new rule by the Speaker Fergus, which would mean MPs can't mention the Prime Minister in the House unless he's there. He often comes just once a week. Slick moves. I mean, part of the slick moves is Justin Trudeau only showing up to the House once a week. That's one thing. But Rob says, correction, it's not that Trudeau's name cannot be mentioned when he's not in the House of Commons. It's that the fact that he's not there cannot be mentioned. So, and that's a good distinction as well. They can talk about Trudeau because he's the Prime Minister, and they can talk about other MPs, but the fact that they're not there shouldn't be part of it. And I've heard Rhoda come down on Poilievre and others for talking about Justin Trudeau's absence, because they say the fact that he's not here is not news. Yeah, okay, fine. National Post is reporting on the barn. This is the barn, right? And a further story that I got wrong. Apparently it's carbon neutral. This is from October 19th. Thanks, Noel, for sharing this. National Post says NCC paid over $8 million to replace a barn at Rideau Hall, records show. The completed project is a 2-level, zero carbon storage and vehicle garage. How is it zero carbon? Do you see that concrete? Am I imagining that concrete? Is that zero carbon concrete? Sure it is. It's got solar panels on the roof, and it's interesting because it's if you had a 2-story barn, it doesn't look tall enough to have a 2-story barn. It looks like 1.5 stories because of the pitch of the roof. So wild. That's $8 million. I could see that being $8 million. So the interesting, and like a building like that is expensive, especially when you pretend it's carbon neutral. I would wonder how much they spent to make it carbon neutral. And so it's interesting, the rhetoric being used and bandied about this use of money. It's a storage shed, all of the rest of it. I don't mind spending money on infrastructure. I mind wasting money on carbon neutral. We shouldn't be doing that. I mind waste if a building like this could be built for $4 million and like equal construction costs if you're not using green concrete and things like that, then we should do that. Like, I think there's probably a lot of waste in this, but it's one of those things that I don't have a problem with spending money on infrastructure, on maintaining properties that are owned by the government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the whole structure of government that I have a problem with. Like the whole structure of, we're going to tax you, Mark, and then with your taxes, sure, you get access to healthcare, but it's not really healthcare unless it's a dire emergency. And even then you're unvaccinated. So if you need an organ, right? So like the healthcare is hinky and the wait lists are crazy. I still haven't got a call back from my doctor's referral for my hernia, which is wild. So like hinky, right? Like it's pretty incredible. I think that if this was the United States, I'd already have had my surgery. If I was on private healthcare in the United States, somebody somewhere would have wanted that dollar, and they would have got me in there and done the surgery and bingo, bango, bongo. Regardless of all of that, the healthcare is subpar. The infrastructure, like if you're taxed at the city level, subpar. Federally, the things that the governments are doing, subpar. Generally, education, subpar. So every level of government has things that they're doing. They're taking my tax dollars and they're spending it on Ukraine, or they're spending it on rainbow sidewalks, or they're spending it on indoctrinating children, or they're spending it on anything but healthcare, right? So there's all of these problems with how they're spending the taxes. And if they were spending taxes across the board pretty well, then I think that we wouldn't have as big a problem as we do. But this is just one example of improper spending where it looks legit. Somebody could look at that and say, oh yeah, that's an $8 million barn. It looks kind of maybe legit, but is the concrete any greener, right? Is this just all a grift? It seems like it's a grift, and the whole structure of the government spending is faulty in my opinion, because my tax dollars should go to the federal government maintaining the basic underpinnings of society. The roads work, they're plowed, the railways work, the airlines, have the infrastructure they need to work. But again, the federal government doesn't need to have a hand in every one of these. They just need to be able to make them work in a way that the commerce can happen over top of it. The government shouldn't be the commerce too. The government should get the heck out of the way and stop trying to manage everything all the time. It's unbelievable. So I have more of a problem. The $8 million in the barn here doesn't bother me. The waste in it does, because there is waste in it, but that doesn't bother me. It's a microcosm, though. It's an example of the waste in our whole government. They could probably have done it for half, and the other half didn't need to be done. And our entire government is like that. And we wouldn't have any reduction in the bad service we've got if you just cut off that half. You just get rid of the waste that way. And still, you'd need to go and fix the actual service delivery, right? Because the service delivery is terrible right now as well for everything. From passports to healthcare to education, everything is terrible. Awful, terrible. And it's bad policy. It is badly run by people who don't know what the hell they're doing. Excuse my French. Disclosed TV is reporting just in Swiss People's Party, which campaigned against mass migration and woke madness, is projected to be the big winner in the Swiss federal elections, while the left-wing Green Party is the big loser. Maxime Bernier says, when silly trolls tell you the People's Party of Canada sounds like a communist name, remind them that the Conservatives in the European Parliament are represented by the People's Party of Europe, and in Switzerland, the People's Party is the populist equivalent of the PPC, and they just won. So there you go. We are not communists. And the communists are the liberals. They've taken the Liberal Party and the Liberal NDP coalition to communist town and back again. It's unbelievable. I was going to start the show today with the Founderings because it's kind of Halloween-y, the What's This treatment, and it's really, really good. I really like this guy's songs. He's very talented with regards to his songs, but for Halloween purposes, I was going to do it, but then I didn't. I don't know why. I really like the We Didn't Start the Fire because it's very apropos of what's going on right now anyway. So intro song problems. Anyway, here is the talk about housing that I was telling you guys about. This guy is talking about how Toronto's already had its bubble popped, but people haven't realized it yet and they haven't caught up. And that bubble popping is impacting the banking sector already with auto loan freezes and all sorts of other very, very difficult's not the right word, but impactful banking responses to the bubble popping. So he's making an argument, and again, it's like a 9-minute video, so it's a little bit beyond the scope of today's podcast, but all of the videos worth watching. Link is in the description. Here we go.
People, when that came out, they were like, oh yeah, this is great. It means Toronto's no longer in a bubble. And no, it doesn't mean Toronto's no longer in a bubble. All it means that the bubble isn't that big anymore, that it's considered a major risk by UBS. But the thing is, the bubble has already burst in Toronto, and you're going to see the ramifications of that bubble bursting impact the banking system. And in fact, we're already seeing that happen. You see, you're already seeing credit tightening. BMO has got out of the auto loan business. Scotiabank is actively tightening their mortgage lending. So you've essentially got the start of a credit crunch. Nobody is listening. Nobody wants to talk about it. But the fact is, this is the start of a credit crunch. So when you have a credit crunch coupled with an economic crisis like a recession, that is a toxic combination for any housing bubble or any housing market, and we're seeing that play out right now. What's crazy to me is people cannot see the risk in the banking system right now that I think is just so obvious. I mean, there is so much risk built up in the banking system, and it's really been the case since 2020, guys. We only have to talk about since 2020 because you saw the mortgage deferrals in 2020 and 2021. Everybody couldn't afford to pay their mortgage then, and a lot of the layoffs that happened in 2020 and 2021 were as the result of businesses having a high amount of debt that they needed to service. And essentially when the pandemic hit and everything shut down, they immediately started cutting jobs, laying people off because they had so much expenses, they had so much debt. And that is why
So there you go. So again, he puts together a very good argument talking about what's going on now is as a result of the knock ping run on, but it's a housing bubble and the housing bubble's bursting and we're seeing the impacts, and it's not going to be easy to solve, especially because the bad policies compound the problems. David Mulrooney says asylum claims jump at Canadian airports after Ottawa eases some visitor visa requirements. The Globe and Mail is reporting they could have used the technology tools they have to process those applications. It wouldn't have created this really bad precedent. So it's interesting how many people we're letting in, and when we've realized we can't house them all, we double down and we let more people in, which seems like a terrible, awful, brutal idea. Rachel Emmanuel says Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says an Alberta pension plan is controversial, but the province has been having the discussion for 25 years. She says her government has asked the feds for their estimation of Alberta's assets, but Ottawa responds with negativity. Okay. Yesterday we had a kitchen table talk and it was really good. It was fun and lots of people had really good insights into certain things going on. And MC had some really interesting insights about the Alberta pension plan and the CPP. He said he was answering my question of, is CPP solvent? And he said it's solvent if Alberta stays in. And I thought that might be the case. And so Alberta, in this little clip here, Danielle Smith has done a calculation of how much is owed for Alberta to just divest from the CPP and take it all and become Alberta pension plan. And if they do that, I think that the CPP, the Canada-wide one, done, like dinner, collapses completely. So I think they're trying everything they can to prevent this from happening. Polyev, I showed you yesterday, is on board with Justin Trudeau. He says, Danielle Smith should stay in the CPP because reasons. And Danielle Smith, I don't think she's even going to get an answer for what kind of accounting do you want us, like what number do you think that it should be? Because the number that she's going to get is going to be a lot lower than the number she needs to make the whole thing viable. And so I think everybody knows that, right? Like if Alberta takes the haircut, then it's not going to be good because it's all compounded, right? They were shortchanged in the beginning and it's all compounded. So they need a lot of money to divest and money that the government doesn't want to give. Here's a minute of this. Here you go.
It was written in 2001 by a lot of academics, including at the time Stephen Harper. And they said, what do we need to do to be more like Quebec? Collect our own taxes, have our own provincial police, manage our own immigration, and have our own pension system. So this conversation's been going on in our province for 25 years now. When we got the report done, it was done by Morneau Chappelle. So yes, that Morneau, Bill Morneau, so it wasn't like we were choosing somebody who we thought was in the bag for us. They looked at what the legislation says, and we have overpaid in this province $60 billion in our premiums. That is compounded over time, and so we are now entitled, under their formula, to $342 billion, which, yes, is 53% of the assets. And so we've asked the federal government, if you disagree with our calculation, tell us what you think the calculation should be. Or a CPP, if you disagree, tell us what you think the calculation should be. And all they come back with is slander and negativity, and they haven't answered that question.
They came back and they said, would a shiny new $10 bill suffice? No. Oh, that's slander and negativity. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful